or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Elizabeth Ortel, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the Wednesday, July 29th issue of Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The first article that I'll share with you from the front page is North Niagara finds basements, crops submerged after rainstorm. And there's a picture here of a flooded Line 2 road in Virgil, Niagara on the Lake, and it received more than 146 millimeters of rain. St. Catherine says volume of rainfall overnight was too much for its pipes, by Karina Walter, reporter. Hundreds of St. Catherine's residents reported flooded basements, trails were washed out, and the city's indoor pool was closed after another major rainstorm thundered through late Monday night and seemed to never ease up early Tuesday morning. The city declared a significant weather event Tuesday, a formal declaration that tells the public there are weather hazards causing risks and the city may not be able to meet normal maintenance standards. It also partially activated its Emergency Operations Center. Mayor Matt Cisco, whose basement was flooded halfway up his calf, said municipal crews have been out since 2:30 a.m., responding to widespread flooding across the city. He said staff are reporting it's a volume issue, not a blockage issue. This appears to be entirely volume related, he said. Our staff have checked all of the areas of the city where the flooding is occurring. They haven't found, as far as I know, any blockages. So this is just a massive amount of water falling in a short period of time that the infrastructure couldn't handle. Peter Kimball, Environment Canada warning preparedness meteorologist, said St. Catharines experienced a local flash flood, which was a huge amount of rain in a short period of time. He said precipitation measurements from the storm at Port Weller in northeast St. Catharines were 126.9 millimeters or 5 inches as of 11 a.m. Tuesday. That was higher than in Vineland in Lincoln, which was hit with 87.8 millimeters or almost 3.5 inches of rain. It was worse in Niagara on the Lake, which was reporting it received 146.26 millimeters or 5.74 inches of rain overnight. Flash floods occur every year in Ontario, but they're always very unpleasant when they hit your neighborhood, Kimball said, explaining as common as they are uncommon for any one place. Just like a lottery, there's always a winner, but chances are it's someone else. It's a common occurrence that is uncommon at a particular location. Kimball said the storm in St. Catharines began about 11 p.m. Monday and brought its heaviest rainfall between midnight and 1 a.m., when 44 millimeters fell in 1 hour. Between 2 and 3 a.m., it was another 37.7 millimeters, and between 3 and 4 a.m., another 20 millimeters. He said the rest of the week will be in the normal range of temperatures and the weather will be benign, with no storms forecasted. Cisco said the city is asking people to stay away from any creeks, water courses, ditches, and other bodies of water. Sports fields are closed, trails were washed out and closed, and park permits were canceled. Garden City Golf Course closed. Some city roads were closed temporarily. The St. Catharines Kiwanis Aquatic Center indoor pool was closed after the basement of the building that holds critical systems that operate the facility flooded. Cisco said the building was still open, including the lobby, washrooms, and library. They have showers available as well, and so we're directing people who are in really bad straits. Qantas is one of the facilities they can still access, and all city facilities are going to be open during the normal business hours for washrooms. The exception is at the Port Dalhousie pool, where washrooms and showers aren't functioning. The cause is believed to be a storm-related issue. The pool has been closed as a result. The port supper market was canceled Tuesday, and Wednesday's hot summer nights at Lock 3 Park at St. Catherine's Museum and Welland Canal Center is rescheduled to August 26th. Cisco on Tuesday morning said the city received hundreds of calls to its Citizens First customer service line and expected the number to climb through the day. He asked residents to have patience because the call volume was high and to make sure they call their insurance company first, so that process is started. He has spoken with city councilors in Grantham, St. George's, and St. Patrick's wards who have heard from residents dealing with flooding. Basically, the top northern 2/3 of the city are having the same issues in different places, so this seems to be very widespread, he said. St. Catherine's has a website with information for residents who have flooded basements or want to prevent a flood at stcatharines.ca/basement-flooding. It also has a flood alleviation rebate program for residents who want to install flood prevention devices like backwater valves or take other actions. The FLAP program offers rebates covering up to 90% of eligible cost to a maximum of $5,000. It's a good program. If residents haven't taken advantage of it, I think they should. Information is available at stcatharines.ca/FLAP. Niagara-on-the-Lake reported the town was hearing from residents and businesses about flooded properties, damaged crops, and high water levels. The town said in a press release, the volume of rain overwhelmed drainage systems already under pressure from saturated ground, high lake levels, and full waterways. It said its council has made investments in storm management to improve capacity, reliability, and resilience of the town's drainage system. But no municipal stormwater system can completely prevent flooding during rainfall events of this magnitude. As extreme weather events become more frequent and intense, the town will continue to assess infrastructure performance and prioritize future investments to strengthen the community's resilience over the long term. Niagara-on-the-Lake residents experiencing flooding or a sewer backup are asked to report it to the town by phone at 905-468-3266, extension 0, or submitting an online service request at notl.com/request-service- file-issue. Another article I'd like to share with you from the Niagara Falls Review of July 29th. Man who beat amputee father to death, sentenced to 9 years. January 2025 assault. took place in shared apartment in Niagara Falls by Allison Langley, reporter. A Niagara man who beat his father to death in a drug-fueled rage has been sentenced to 9 years in custody. Blair Young, 45, was originally charged with attempted murder in January 2025 after emergency responders found Larry Young in an apartment in downtown Niagara Falls. The 72-year-old man, who was missing a leg, had sustained life-threatening injuries, including a catastrophic brain injury. He died a few days later at a Hamilton hospital, and the criminal charge against his son was upgraded to second-degree murder. Blair Young pleaded guilty earlier this year to the lesser offense of manslaughter. In Ontario Court of Justice in St. Catharines on Friday, Judge Janet Bull imposed a custodial sentence of 9 years. Court was told at an earlier date the offender struggles with mental health issues fueled by drug addiction. Defense attorney Andrew Fruguli, who had advocated for a sentence in the range of 6 to 8 years behind bars, said his client's drug-induced psychosis was the catalyst for the crime. But for the mental illness, this offense doesn't happen, he told the judge during a sentencing hearing held earlier this month. This is a tragedy, and it is sad, and it is emblematic of what happens when an individual cannot deal with these sorts of issues, with this sort of mental illness. Young had been struggling with homelessness prior to the murder, court heard, and his father had allowed his son to move in with him to escape the cold winter. Shortly after 1 p.m. on January 26, 2025, Niagara Regional Police were called to Greater Niagara General Hospital regarding a man who had been brought in with severe injuries. A police investigation determined the victim had been assaulted inside his unit at the Buckley Towers apartment complex. Court was told the injured man had likely been on the floor of his apartment for about 3 hours before he was discovered and 911 was called. The Crown had sought a sentence of 12 years in a penitentiary. The Crown said the victim would have been unable to defend himself from this brutal and senseless beating. Another article from the front page. Ontario wineries toast move to allow direct-to-consumer sales across Canada. Industry has been lobbying to open borders for 20 years. By Kevin Warner, reporter. Ontario wineries are celebrating the decision of a majority of Canadian premiers to allow direct-to-consumer alcohol purchases among the provinces. This is something that we have been advocating for decades, said Aaron Dobbin, Wine Growers Ontario President and Chief Executive Officer. It has been one of the things on our books for a long time. The July 21st agreement was to begin immediately, officials said. But British Columbia needs additional time to update its regulations, and its target to begin the process is no later than next February. The agreement applies to 9 provinces and does not yet include Quebec or the territories. The agreement is essentially an extension of one Ontario signed with Nova Scotia in March. LCBO has already approved 14 Nova Scotian alcohol producers for direct-to-consumer sales in Ontario. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. This is a landmark achievement for Canadian consumers and wineries, said Dan Piskowski, Wine Growers of Canada president and CEO. An independent 2026 report on the future of Canada's wine industry by consulting and audit firm Deloitte identified the country's fragmented domestic market as the single greatest barrier to the industry's long-term growth, said officials. The LCBO said Ontario representatives will begin issuing authorizations to eligible producers from the provinces that have signed the agreement. Ontario producers, they said, should contact the appropriate regulatory authority in each jurisdiction to learn about authorization requirements. Cheers, say producers. Jamie Slingerland, Director of Viticulture at Pillsbury Estates Winery in Niagara-on-the-Lake, said the entire wine industry is jubilant about the agreement after waiting some 20 years for change to occur. And he's on page 2. It is a momentous leap forward in strengthening and providing choice to Canadian consumers, he said. Slingerland and Pillsbury sees the agreement as an opportunity to sell more wine. With the entire revolution of online consumer sales, it only made sense that direct-to-consumer wine sales be allowed in Ontario and now across most of Canada. Wine Growers of Canada urges all provinces to maintain zero or very low levies and administrative fees as the direct-to-consumer process is implemented in each jurisdiction. Previously, Ontario consumers could only buy alcohol from other provinces if it was listed for sale by LCBO. They had to purchase it through LCBO's private ordering program. The new agreement will still require alcohol producers from the rest of Canada to ask LCBO for authorization to sell directly to Ontarians and ship it to their homes, said Sarah Chapin, spokesperson for Ontario Finance Minister Peter Bethlenfalvy. Our government continues to lead the way on tearing down interprovincial trade barriers and work with other provinces to join us, giving consumers greater choice and convenience while creating more opportunities for producers and manufacturers. The Ontario government has said the move is projected to unlock an estimated $200 billion in unrealized economic growth within Canadian borders. Priority on wine list. Dobbin said eliminating barriers to direct-to-consumer sales has been at the top of his agenda since he became president of Wine Growers of Canada 7 years ago. It is really going to help our members, he said. It has been a significant challenge for our members to get their wine onto LCBO shelves. He said wineries that sell premium wines will benefit most because of the cost associated with shipping. Customers in British Columbia or Prince Edward Island are seeking high-profile wines to consume rather than $10 bottles. For smaller wineries, to make a few sales of cases of wine can make a huge difference for them, he said. The agreement would also make it easier for tourists to ship their favorite wines to their homes rather than sticking them in the trunk of vehicles or carrying them on a plane. Dobbin said he is hopeful Quebec will join the agreement. Quebec Premier Christine Fréchette has said her province supports the objectives of this agreement, but has to pass legislation before it can be implemented. Dobbin said there's no doubt a main reason for the pact is the United States' implementation of tariffs on Canada. President Donald Trump signed an executive order last week to impose a new 50% tariff on some Canadian goods starting in August. Goods affected include wine, hockey sticks, and cement, for what the administration has characterized as discriminatory trade policies. Ontario Premier Doug Ford said in a statement, in the face of U.S. President Trump's latest tariffs, it's more important than ever that Team Canada work together to build a more united, resilient, and self-reliant Canadian economy. Chris Barnier, President and CEO of Ontario Craft Wineries, said his membership is extremely pleased with the province's decision on direct-to-consumer sales. We applaud the Ontario Premier Doug Ford government for doing it. Our members see it as a good thing. The Canadian Wine Organization said their members welcome competition from other provinces and are eager to compete in other areas. Dobbin said one of the issues Ontario wine growers will monitor is whether there will be barriers installed by provinces, such as a tax, to the direct-to-consumer sale. He said the direct-to-consumer agreement announced by Ontario with Nova Scotia provided a template for the rest of the provinces to follow. He said there was only a minimal tax to ship to and from Nova Scotia. From page 5 in the local news, longtime friends make leap to Niagara band Luna Pier. John Law, reporter. Some bands take a while to percolate. Others might need a few years, but Niagara band Luna Pier, it was decades before its members settled on each other. Then another 9 years before they released an album. They've played the long game. Now it's time to make it count. Phototaxis is the band's long gestating debut. Is a surging, polished collection reminiscent of The Killers and the War on Drugs. The St. Catharines band sounds locked in together, a byproduct of not just taking its time, but forging long friendships. Indeed, some bandmates have known each other since 3rd grade. Others watched each other's high school bands with envy during the 90s. It was a time when everybody was joining bands, said drummer Chris Coop. We found each other playing in different bands throughout high school. Me, being a few years younger than these guys, added singer-guitarist Drew Williams. In grade 7 and 8, we would be competing in Battle of the Bands locally, and I would see the others, and I always looked up to these guys because I thought their bands were so cool. It's funny to be playing in a band with these guys now. My younger self would have been pretty thrilled. The tight-knit band includes guitarist James Hine, bassist Mike Enns, and keyboardist Brittany Coop. Williams was the last to join in 2017, and his songs were the final piece needed to launch Luna Pier. We already knew how talented he was as a musician and songwriter, and we were hoping he was available. Forming a band as adults this time, not high school kids, was key, he added. Knowing each other removed any unpleasant surprises, and the songs benefited their familiarity. How special it is to be friends, to make art, to make music, and to be able to share that, said Enns. It's just something that brought us great joy. The trick now is to properly promote an album they're proud of without overdoing it. There is no tour planned, no expensive promotion. Instead, the band plans on making a local impression by playing festivals and building word of mouth. But if the opportunity arises to hit the road, they've already made preparations. Chris and Brittany Coop both work for a school with a boss who is incredibly supportive of staff being in a band. She said if you were ever to receive an opportunity that you couldn't turn down, just go. See how far you can take it. It's awesome to have supportive people in our lives. And for Britt and I, employers are really enthusiastic about what we're involved in. Everything is gone. Images show wildfire damage outside the village of Clinton. There are vehicles that are just destroyed. No hoods, no windshields, doors missing. There was little left besides twisted metal, blackened trees, the charred shell of a car, and a tractor still burning in images taken at a property outside Clinton, British Columbia, by the owner whose home was destroyed by a ferocious wildfire on Friday. Chris Webster said his father, James Webster, filmed and shared a video after briefly returning to the property the next day to assess the damage. Heartbreakingly, everything is gone, he said in a Facebook post. Webster said his father's property, which is south of the village of Clinton, was not initially included in an evacuation zone, but the Pear Lake blaze surged on Friday, forcing James Webster, his partner, and their 2 dogs to escape. Webster said his family was safe in Cache Creek, British Columbia, about 40 kilometers south of Clinton, waiting to hear when it's safe to return home and see if anything can be salvaged before starting the daunting task of rebuilding. Clinton's mayor, Roland Stank, said in a Facebook post on Tuesday that the village was still waiting for a structural assessment. He has said people whose properties were damaged in the fire would be contacted directly. It was too early to lift the evacuation order, he added. A post on the village's Facebook page said the wildfire remained active and still posed a threat. Crews were responding to flare-ups and potential hotspots as the fire burns in the hills surrounding the community, about 350 kilometers northeast of Vancouver. The Big Bar complex of fires in the area has continued to grow, prompting expanded evacuation orders and alerts over the last few days. In a video posted by the BC Wildfire Service on Tuesday, Bryce Morera, the incident commander for the complex, said winds were expected to fan extreme fire behavior, while smoke was inhibiting aerial firefighting efforts. The BC Conservation Officers Service has meanwhile urged anyone planning a camping trip to review the latest fire restrictions. A social media post from the service on Monday said its officers discovered numerous illegal campfires during spot checks over the weekend, issuing 19 violation tickets and almost $22,000 in fines. Premier David Abbey said Tuesday that he understood some Clinton residents may be hearing they had lost homes or businesses as the Pear Lake fire surged on Friday. I just want to say I know all British Columbians are thinking of those folks right now, and knowing with the wildfire seasons we've had that this threat is present and in every corner of the province. He told an unrelated news conference. Abbey also praised the work of firefighters to save much of the village itself. Features from the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In the opinion section from the Niagara Falls Review, Carney's agenda being put to the test. In a matter of weeks, we might find out just how eager Mark Carney really is to sell off our airports. We should also get a better sense of which other Canadian assets foreign investors want. That is, if we're able to peek behind closed doors as top figures in global finance gather in Toronto for what could be a defining moment in Carney's attempts at nation building. The Canada Investment Summit, taking place September 14th and 15th, has flown under the radar for many Canadians since the Prime Minister announced plans for it last spring, but that certainly hasn't been the case on Bay Street. The buzz in those circles mostly seems positive. Although the guest list hasn't been made public, The chatter is that Carney is successfully leveraging his international credibility to attract roughly 100 leaders of sovereign wealth funds, investment firms, and pension giants. There's also speculation that to show momentum, the government will use the summit to unveil a few specific new commitments by foreign investors. But it will be more telling when Carney finally opens up his investment book, a showcase of investment ready projects and assets that the PM is believed to be preparing. Once the potential investments are unveiled, we might get an answer to an overarching question. Will foreign investors help build things in Canada that domestic investors won't? Or are we just talking about transferring ownership of what we already have? There's some irony to the fact that the summit will be co-hosted by the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, CPPIB, and the Public Sector Pension Investment Board. CPPIB, in particular, has been a source of frustration for politicians who want Canada's pension giants to keep more of their capital within this country. The folks doing the investing for the pension plans tend to reply that there aren't enough investment-ready opportunities here, at least not at the lower risk levels they can responsibly take on while minding Canadians' retirement savings. So the hope is that Carney can produce a list of credible prospects, mines, energy projects, new export capacity, and the like, that deep-pocketed visitors to Toronto prove more enthusiastic about. Foreign investors might have a higher risk tolerance because of different client bases or a willingness to take on more exposure in Canada, especially if they feel over-leveraged in the increasingly unstable United States. Some of them might specialize more in infrastructure than the domestics, too. These kinds of factors could make them more open to equity in greenfield projects, building things anew rather than taking over existing assets. Or if they do want in on existing assets, they could be underperforming ones in need of serious expansion or modernization, ports being one possible example. Much less useful would be Canada selling off things that don't really need a foreign cash infusion. So it would be helpful if, before the summit, Carney could lay out to Canadians which forms of investment he believes are in our interests, which aren't, and why. That brings us back to the airports. It would be a big surprise if, having already announced interest in privatizing the likes of Toronto Pearson International Airport, Carney lays out next steps for that process. A chance to buy our airports is one thing for which our own pension funds have long been clamoring because of reliable revenues. Carney is under growing pressure to show results from his push to prove that Canada is open for business. His government was rattled by a recent Financial Times report that the United Arab Emirates approached the new Major Projects Office looking for investable opportunities and was turned away. But Carney shouldn't just be chasing deals for the sake of deals, just to avoid more stories like that coming out of his flagship event. In the community update of the Niagara Falls Review, obituaries. Kathleen Vanderkant, née Green, passed peacefully at home, surrounded by the love of her family, on July 20th, 2026, at the age of 77. Jennifer Lynn née Miller Harper passed away peacefully as she wished in Grimsby at West Lincoln Memorial Hospital on Monday, July 27th, 2026. Born January 10th, 1998 at Oshawa General Hospital, left To mourn her are her mother, Diane, and stepfather Roger Bain, and brother and sister-in-law David and Lindsay Miller. Another, Les Ort, passed away peacefully surrounded by his family at the St. Catherine's Hospital on Sunday, July 26th, in his 83rd year. Beloved husband of Carolyn Nay Rominger, loving father of Nancy Ort, Isaac Phillips, and Julie Renwick, Bill Mitchell. Another local obituary, George Douglas Wilson, November 12, 1949 to July 26, 2026. It is with deep sadness that we announce the passing of George Douglas Wilson of Niagara Falls on July 26, 2026, at the age of 76. Following a brief illness, George leaves behind his beloved wife of 56 years, Anita Wilson, née Griffith, of Niagara Falls, his son Daryl Wilson, daughter-in-law Shelley Wilson, and cherished granddaughter Alexis Wilson, all of Calgary. Jerry Wayne Forrest. It is with sadness that we announce the passing of Jerry Wayne Forrest on Friday, July 24th, 2026 at the Welland General Hospital. Jerry is lovingly remembered by his wife, Rosemarie Forrest, née Rodriguez, forever in the hearts of his children, Tammy, Daryl, Tracy, Mike, and Jeff Kelly, and his stepchildren, Bobby and Sue, Annette, James, and Randy Heather. Jerry will be missed by his sister Gloria, his brother Warren and Dorothy, and his sister Betty. Articles from page A10, Canada and World. PC slam Ottawa over airport ruling. Transportation Minister said Toronto Billy Bishop expansion plan was killed by fringe group by Liam Casey. Ottawa gave in to the demands of a fringe group when it rejected a pitch to expand Toronto's Island Airport. Ontario Transportation Minister Parmeet Sarkaria said Tuesday. He said the province was disappointed by the federal government's decision to nix Premier Doug Ford's proposed expansion of the Billy Bishop Toronto City Airport to allow jets to land and take off from it. The runway is currently too short for jets. Federal Transport Minister Stephen McKinnon rejected the plan last week after 87% of the 87,000 respondents to a public consultation opposed the idea. Sarkaria said the province was disappointed by McKinnon's decision. We've seen the federal government here listen to a small fringe group in Toronto, but we as the province will continue to push forward on a modernization of this airport because it's the right thing to do, Sarkaria said. The progressive conservative government at Queen's Park made the island airport expansion a key feature in the spring sitting. It tabled and passed Bill 110, which became law in early June. That law gave the province the ability to take the entirety of the Toronto Islands, though the government said it would only take what's necessary, despite the language in the legislation. The province also booted the city from a long-standing tripartite agreement that governs Billy Bishop Airport. Ontario took over the city's spot in that agreement, joining the federal government and the Toronto Port Authority, an arm's-length federal agency. Sarkaria said the Port Authority will soon be putting forward its modernization plan. Toronto Port Authority CEO R.J. Steenstra told the Queen's Park Committee studying Bill 110 that the airport expansion would cost upwards of $5 billion, which would be paid for by airlines and passengers over 25 years. Steenstra said at the hearing, that he shared preliminary plans with the federal and provincial governments, but not the city, which he said was due to scheduling issues. The Ford government wants to see 10 million passengers per year fly through the island airport, up from 2 million passengers. The airport's passenger terminal is owned by Newport Aviation, which is controlled by J.P. Morgan Asset Management, a U.S. based firm. The federal government's rejection prompted Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow to demand that the Ontario government repeal the bill that allowed the province to expropriate land from the city as it pushed for the expansion. Sarkaria rejected that idea. "We have no intention to repeal," he said Tuesday. "We urge the federal government to continue to consider that proposal because it's a proposal that makes sense for people that want to travel through air and have different options." Sarkaria also questioned the federal government's ability to build major projects. "If this is how they're going to treat bigger projects, I don't think you'll get much built." In the sports section, hockey. Hamilton eyes World Junior Hockey Championship bid. Hosting would bring tournament back to the city for the first time in over 4 decades, by Hannah Schneider, reporter. Hamilton is eyeing a bid to bring the World Junior Hockey Championship back to the city for the first time in more than 40 years. The city's tourism director will ask the General Issues Committee Wednesday to direct staff to pursue a bid to host junior hockey's largest international tournament in 2032, according to a staff report. Final approval would then rest with City Council. If successful, hosting the tournament is expected to carry a $6 million price tag, mirroring the $4 million in provincial and $2 million in municipal and private funding Ottawa secured when Canada last hosted the event in 2025. The report suggested the event could see up to hundreds of thousands of attendees. However, the report does not recommend funding the event with local tax dollars. Instead, the city plans to draw on Hamilton's Tourism Development Corporation, provincial and federal grants, and private and public sponsors. The report noted that backing from the corporation and third-party partners has already been secured for a major national sporting event, but details remain confidential. It added that the staff will not move forward with a bid without full funding in place. The economic return could be substantial. Past Canadian host cities have reported tens of millions of dollars in economic impact, with recent championships in Ottawa and Halifax and Moncton, each injecting more than $50 million into those local economies. Hamilton's recent hosting of the 2026 Juno Awards delivered a record $17.2 million in local economic impact. The city's tourism director noted that landing the tournament would make use of recent major venue upgrades, including the $300 million makeover of TD Coliseum and ongoing investments in the Hamilton Convention Center. A successful bid would see Hamilton co-host the 10-team event alongside a regional partner city. Hamilton last hosted the championship in 1986, an event Canadian hockey executives have credited with boosting the popularity of the annual tournament. The 17,521 fans who turned out to watch Canada face the United States at Copps Coliseum now TD Coliseum, marked what was then the largest single game crowd in the tournament's history. The city submitted a joint bid with Kitchener to host the 2003 event, but ultimately lost out to Halifax. Now a reading from the July 28th issue of the Niagara Falls Review front page. Rejected police recruits seek information. NRP says feedback improving details often confidential. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. This article is from the front page of July 28th, Alan Benner, reporter. Despite adding dozens of officers in the past few years, Niagara Regional Police Board members are concerned about potential recruits aren't being told why they didn't make the cut. NRP Talent Acquisition and Development Manager Zora Bura said the service hired 73 constables last year, with 43 more hired so far this year. She told board members during last Thursday's monthly meeting the NRP is on track to hire a total of 85 police constables before the end of 2026. Vice Chair Pat Chioccio, a Welland Regional Councillor, said he often tries to encourage people to apply for careers with the NRP, including graduates of the Police Foundation's course at Niagara College. They've done their volunteer work, things that they think would help them get into the service, he said. A few of those people, however, have told him they went through the process but were eliminated along the way without being given feedback about why they are not proceeding to the next step. It's just like a thank you, try again in a year, or whatever, without any feedback. Bora said she has heard the same complaints in the past several months, but that the NRP is working to ensure our recruiters are giving feedback. However, she said that feedback may depend on where they do get declined in the process. Some information may be very sensitive for us to share, Burra said. Whether it's fitness testing, we have implemented more of a proactive approach to sharing information about why candidates do not proceed in the recruitment process. Burra said feedback gives applicants insight on things they need to work on or do differently to increase their chances of success if they choose to reapply at a later date. Chocho said he knows people who have tried 5 or 6 times and they keep getting no response whatsoever, and I think they've even called and asked for a reason but haven't received any feedback. Red flags. Asked why police would withhold information from an applicant about why they were eliminated during the hiring process, Deputy Chief Todd Wasilovich said it rarely occurs. But in some cases, intelligence reports about an individual that may have come from an outside agency or another policing service might be withheld if it was part of a larger investigation. He said lack of disclosure from applicants themselves about information from their past is also a red flag, drawing credibility and accountability of the applicant into question. If they're not being honest with themselves at times, that would make them excluded from the applicant process. Chocho said one applicant he knows did not have a criminal background but didn't make it through the NRP's recruitment process despite applying several times. They applied to Hamilton and got in the first time, he said. I just don't understand how we missed out on this person because I think he would have been an excellent officer. Board member Laura Ip a regional counselor for St. Catherine's, asked how many candidates from diverse backgrounds who apply are hired. If the percentage of diverse candidates who are hired is much smaller than those who apply, then that would suggest that there's an issue within the hiring system. You can do all of this outreach, but there's still an issue in the system if you're not getting the diversity at the end of the process. Burr said she did not have that information available during the meeting, but would email it to the counselor. Diversity commitments. In 2024, the NRP released a new diversity plan titled Be Who We Serve. We must create an organization where diverse groups are reflected in the people and lived experiences around them, wrote then board chair Jen Lawson in the plan. Its first strategic objective is listed as promote a culture that embraces diversity. Among demographic information contained in the report, it noted women comprise 51% of Niagara's population at Niagara College, while only 145 female officers were employed by Niagara Regional Police, 18% of the force's sworn complement. The NRP's 2025 annual report and 2026 to 2029 plan both said the force is committed to diversity, but do not include information about the demographic makeup of the force's sworn officers. A December 18, 2025 report to the police board, based on a voluntary survey of new recruits, provided demographic information, but its data was based on a small number of survey respondents. Of 311 officers and staff hired since 2022, only 56 responded. Most respondents identified as white, while a total of 15% were Asian, Black, or Hispanic. Just less than 91% identified as heterosexual. 28th issue, Niagara Parks honors 90 years of horticulture, Bray Spiteri, reporter. During its first 90 years, Niagara Parks School of Horticulture has done more than just grow plants in its botanical gardens. It has grown more than 750 graduates and their lifelong passion for cultivation in their careers. Our Chief Operating Officer, Marcelo Grosso, once said, "We begin to love this place. And as a graduate, I think I can honestly say it's absolutely true," says Charles Hunter, Niagara Parks Director of Horticulture and Education, during a commemorative ceremony to mark the anniversary Sunday. These gardens become an old friend, a place to share experiences and our memories. No matter where our lives have taken us, we're truly grounded here. Sunday's celebration, held in the Rose Garden, honored 9 decades of horticulture education and the lasting contributions of students, graduates, and staff. Event highlights included messages from the Niagara Parks leadership and concluded with a commemorative tree planting at the entrance to the site's vegetable garden. Established in 1936, Niagara Parks School of Horticulture is one of Canada's longest-running horticultural training programs. Within the botanical gardens along Niagara River Parkway in Niagara Falls, the school has prepared generations of graduates for careers in horticulture. Officials said, as one of Niagara's most treasured landscapes, the botanical gardens reflect Niagara Parks' commitment to horticultural excellence, environmental stewardship, and public learning. Today, the Niagara Parks School of Horticulture remains one of only 6 institutions of its kind in the world, and one of only 3 located in a botanical garden, said Hunter, who was a student at the school. What makes our school particularly unique is that our students are immersed in every aspect of planning, maintaining, and enhancing this world-class garden. He said that the experience provides students with invaluable opportunities for learning and growth. Our students serve as primary caretakers, I say garden guardians of the botanical gardens, while also contributing to the green spaces throughout the Niagara Park system. Through this hands-on experience, they develop not only ethical skills, but also the leadership and creativity and professionalism that define exceptionalism and instinctual horticulturist. I'd like to think that we're just rooted here in this garden forever. Rooted in the philosophies of nature-based play and learning. There's also the Children's Garden at Niagara Parks and will be the largest project of this scale in Ontario and arguably in Canada. It will be a year-long living classroom promoting mental and physical wellness among children and youth by connecting them to nature. We want to inspire them to share our ideals of environmental stewardship. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 28th issue and also from the front and second page of the July 29th issue of the Niagara Falls Review. We read from the Niagara Falls Review every Saturday at 7 p.m. Your reader has been Elizabeth Ortel. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service is Off Duty. At 9 o'clock, Sports Illustrated at 9 o'clock is The Athletic from the New York Times. Stay with us for these readings and more. You're listening to your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our volunteer radio readers broadcast daily readings of newspapers, magazines, and books. For nearly 40 years, radio reading has served people who are blind or have a print disability throughout western New York and southern Ontario's Niagara Peninsula. Our broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service studios are located at 1199 Harlem Road. Please spread the word about your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. For more information, call 716-821-5555. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability